Schmelzle. I'm glad to be holding an esteemed panel today, and we're going to be talking about the future of how AI is being used, generative AI is being used in sales and marketing. So I'm going to start to call people to the front. Just hold applause, please. We'll get them all here, and then we'll actually formally welcome them. But what I'm going to start with is bringing that chair around, and I'd like to first call on Gary Amaral. So Gary, if you would mind taking the seat on the far right there. Gary is a seasoned SaaS entrepreneur and co-founder of Breadcrumbs.io and Uncover. Prior to co-founding both of these startups, Gary gained experience in marketing roles at Hootsuite, Canadian Tire, and BlackBerry. Now I'd like to call Jim Cain. If you would please come and sit in front. Jim started an analytics firm named MacKinnon in 2009, and he bootstrapped the firm to become a recognized brand in the digital analytics consulting space, both here in Ottawa and beyond. It was acquired by Kepler Group in 2022, and since then, in keeping with his Ottawa Valley roots, Jim acquired a nearly 80-year-old live entertainment venue in order to carry on its tradition of bringing musical acts to our area. Now I would like to ask Lubabah Bakht to come to the stage. Lubabah has worked with over 100 businesses across many verticals, including health, science and tech, professional associations, entertainment, consumer product firms, and political campaigns. In the past, she's held these senior roles at MediaForce, Minto, and she is currently the Global Digital Media Trading Manager at Reckitt. Now I would also like to call to the stage Peter MacKinnon. Peter, if you wouldn't mind joining us. Peter has already been introduced, but as a reminder, for close to 2 decades, he's focused on how the innovation economy impacts Canada, and among his specialties is the interrelationship between businesses whose technology and policies are made in reaction to disruptive business models. He's a senior research associate at the University of Ottawa, where he lectures in the Faculty of Engineering and at the Telfer School of Management. And then we will have another person joining shortly, but with that, what I would love to do is have you welcome our panelists. So I've got one mic here, that mic. I'm just going to hand it out. Thank you. Hold your applause. All right, and I am going to hand you that mic, but we'll be beginning with a first opening question. We've talked about a number of use cases thus far today, and I would love, just in rapid fire, if anyone has a notion of how you would pick what kind of use case for AI you would want to put first into your organization, or if you're building an organization, what that AI would be focused on. Because there's just an abundance of choice. So my question is, what criteria do you use to make that choice?
Sorry, should I start? Okay, so, I mean, where I work it's a CPG company, right, Reckitt. It's extremely large. It's a very large operation. We're across multiple markets. It's essentially almost the size of like a small government, right? Different countries. So when we roll out AI solutions, brand safety is a big concern right from the get-go. So, I mean, for my team, I would look right away in terms of work that we do, such as post-campaign analysis, right, within the marketing department. We roll out extremely large campaigns across multiple brands, across so many channels. There's an abundance of data to analyze and such. So in my context for Reckitt, when it comes to things like analysis, AI solutions would be fantastic to have our teams to focus on reviewing the insights and recommendations versus going in and putting time into collecting the data, a lot of the laborsome work that goes into it, so that AI solutions can complement our team's efforts rather than completely take over it, because there needs to be a balance in regards to things like brand safety.
So this is my business, my money decision.
That's right.
Okay. So I've helped some of the largest companies in North America stand up their analytics practices. And if you show me a large organization, I will show you someone that's very pissed off at data and consultants, because they set money on fire. And often planes don't leave the runway, and you guys have been here. So if it was my company, my business, I would probably point the AI tool at doing a full audit of our first, second, and third-party data asset access and do a value calculation. So what have we got? What's plutonium? What can we not use? What are the assets that we have that are valuable? And let that guide the next decision, because oftentimes you find that you're sitting on something that someone decided to collect 15 years ago, and we're not sure why, and it's solid gold, right? You guys have that at work, sounds like. Yeah. So instead of what I think we should do, let's try the machine out and have it tell us what it thinks we have that is valuable before we take our next steps. So hopefully we can incrementally do work that isn't burning garbage bags full of money.
Good advice. Burning garbage bags full of money is a bad idea for sure. My background for the last 5 years has really been startups. I've spent 5 years building breadcrumbs, the last year working on a product called Uncover. And I spent a lot of my time consulting other startup founders up into kind of the mid-market is where I spend most of my time. And I think it's really two factors. Where can I use Gen AI to save time with minimal risk, right? So most companies at that scale aren't building their own models. At best, they're fine-tuning. They're using solutions off the shelf. And there's real risk with AI. Reputational risk, regulatory risk, depending on what business you're in. So really looking at the opportunities where it's low value, repetitive work that you can offload at a low cost.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Gary. So I would like to now introduce Brett Serjeantson. So Brett is known as an innovator in using AI in various industries. His background has been in building technology for the PR industry, and in 2001 he founded a real-time media monitoring tool, which today sounds pretty ordinary, but in 2001 was rocket surgery, and it was called Mediamizer, and it went on to grow and to be acquired in 2014. He's also gained numerous accreditations in data science and has deployed serverless AI models in a variety of verticals through a consulting practice called Generation Gig. Brett, I'm going to start off, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you a question having to do with the quality of data, because Jim was just mentioning how data quality is probably a fantastic prerequisite for choosing what our AI use case would be that we're going to build. And my question to you is, do you think in general data is good enough to be used for predictive work, especially when it comes to things like revenue? Do you think that we need to reshape our data before we can really put it in a machine where it's going to be used for that?
Yeah, and I think this is where a good data engineer, I think this is where, okay, it works. This is where a good data engineer comes in. So even though I do a lot of data science, I do a lot of AI work these days, I kind of look at myself sometimes as a data engineer. That's where all the hard work is done, and I guess when it comes down to strategizing, deploying capabilities to harvest that data, and that to me is where the heavy lifting is. These days with generative AI, they're really making it easy for us, even on the analytics. Like the analytics, in my mind, is pretty the way I'm thinking these days, because that's how I really started out in the analytics world. When I built my SaaS solution, it was, as you were saying, it was a real-time analytics engine at the end of the day. And I prided myself on that. These days, I think you can almost take out, and we're talking this internally with some of my clients, you can almost take out some of the analytic capabilities that people are building into dashboards, removing that, putting in the LLM to actually do the analysis for you. And looking at companies like Google and AWS, they're really stepping up their games when it comes to their BI tools, where they're actually generating pretty kick-ass analytics. And of course, anybody here that's used an LLM, you throw in data and it's spitting out awesome insights into it. And the one thing it does better than people is, in my mind, is it's able to take that data and correlate it in many ways. And not only that, it can look back into the history of where you've done your analysis before and even shoot out more analysis. But as you were saying, do we have enough data? That's where the challenge is. If you really want your LLMs to sing and perform masterly for you, like what you really need to do is you get a good data engineer. Get somebody like me, maybe. You know what I mean? And be able to harvest that data, come up with a strategy, architect that data. Like this is where like databases come in, and now vector databases. And there's a concept, I don't know if anybody's talked about it. Well, I was paying my parking, but like one of the terminologies, I guess, RAG. Has anybody heard of RAG? Okay, so this is where you can really leverage that data and really get some great analysis. But to get that analysis, you have to be good at setting up your data sources, whether databases, vector databases. I leverage all types of databases, and NoSQL. That's important. You really want to get that data to scale, bring it in, and then you can analyze it.
That's fantastic, and I'm glad that we're getting some difference of opinion here. One thing that we'll hopefully get this afternoon is an accurate state of the market where we're going to have some differences of opinion. This is not going to be one of those panels where everybody agrees with everybody else.
Peter just brought up a great point, synthetic data.
That's right. So we've got another way that maybe the data can come to us rather than us having to develop it all ourselves. But I think some of Jim's point are still well taken, which is we have to sort out the ones that either are in rotten shape or are plutonium, and we do not want to use because it will, for example, torch the trust that we have with our customers. So we have still to put ourselves into that mix. So Peter, if I can, I'm going to involve you on the discussion here. I have a question for you about maybe getting broader. We want to talk about how we as business leaders are making the decisions that will use this very powerful technology. And it's great. It could be great for our organizations and even for the economy as a whole. You've studied this at depth, and you've studied how it will impact us on different levels. We can sometimes look at the workforce, and we notice that AI is redefining tasks that people have always done. And that is happening unevenly. And if it eventually happens very unevenly, it will lead to job disparities. Some people no longer having them, other people only having a job by virtue of the fact that they're using AI in their job. Do you have any insights on how we can deal with this so that we don't break our economy apart in the process?
Well, it's an excellent question. And of course, one that doesn't have any specific answer yet because it's in the future. However, there's scenarios. But let's look at the job creation side of things, or the job side of things. I mean, I think AI is going to have three categories of job impact. It's going to create jobs in AI. It's going to complement people who use it in terms of enhancing their job performance and insight to things that they work on. And it's going to displace jobs. So there's, on that equation, there are a left and a right, and I don't think that the amount of people who will be new jobs versus displaced jobs, I think the displaced is probably going to get bigger unless there's something in the use of AI that's going to grow it in a revenue-generating sense for the people who use it. It'll help the platform providers, help government because there's taxes perhaps there too. But it's the displaced people that I think are going to be the biggest. And companies are going to face large numbers of their staff being displaced at any given time in a transition because it's going to affect so many different layers of the corporation. whether it's at this, administrative level, as in, file clerk and all that kind of stuff, to the CEO and the board. It's going to have an impact. So this has got to be looked at from a business point of view. I think the critical thing is going to be handling the displaced staff. And there's going to be, and it'll happen to many industries, probably industries at a time or several at a time. And that's going to put huge pressure on those who are trying to enter the workforce, because everybody's in a job transition, already employed, and now you're trying to get into a job that you're not sure what that job is going to be because it's in transition. So I think we're going to see a rough time for young employees or young potential employees over the next decade.
Thank you, Peter. I do want the rest of us to weigh in on this, and as you're passing the mic down, one additional area I've heard, if we are cutting ourselves off at the knees with not allowing those entry-level staff, what we mustn't forget is that most of us, including myself, found their way into more intermediate roles because they had been in those entry-level roles where they didn't know up from down, but it was the on-the-job experience that got them familiar with it so that they could move a desk to the left or a desk to the right in order to move into those subject matter expert roles that really make the wheels on our economy turn. Jim.
You stole my follow-up, dude. But that was my follow-up question to you, sir, because that was very interesting. But we're removing jobs immediately in terms of entry-level, marketing communication roles with generative AI. Are we also ensuring that in 15 years from now, VPs of marketing are in the cast of idiocracy because they never had to do any of the ground-up work? Are we ruining future quality and hoping AI will do that also?
Are you asking them? Or asking me?
Anyone?
If I can add to that point, I don't think VPs are catching on that fast, right? The C-suite is not catching on that fast. Corporate would like to think they're moving that fast, but they're not. They are still trying to figure things out. I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing or 2 years. It's going to be a gradual progression where you have your C-suite that, first of all, needs to understand what's being presented, because often what is being presented sometimes is not applicable, right? It's just, it's a wish. It's a wish list, but does that wish list really apply for that particular corporation or not? So I think that part really needs to be addressed. There's a learning curve on the higher end as well. It's not just entry level. It's at the top as well. They have a learning curve to make sure that they're making the proper decisions to kind of roll out these solutions, right? So it won't happen overnight, and you'll be surprised. Some of them, it takes a little bit longer for them to learn than sometimes your entry-level applicants, right? Entry-level applicants are a lot more faster maybe on learning, but the higher up, it takes a little bit longer because there's a lot of unlearning to do as well. And as for with AI, without AI, AI has been kind of around in different applications still. I think in any role, no role really stays the same. It's always shifting and moving. If you come in as a social media expert in 2010 versus 2024, it's a different skill set. You're going to know in 2024, you have to know how to use dashboards. You have to know what metrics are. You have to know what performance means. Whereas 2010, it's I just need to know how to upload this creative and this placement and just make sure things look okay, right? And make sure that the money's being spent to the right audience, not just everybody in the country. So in the application of things, I don't think it's going to be as fast, and it's going to still give some time for the younger generation, or not just necessarily younger, but entry-level applicants to keep upskilling themselves as well and not be caught off guard suddenly that they do not have the skill set for the market.
This is sorry, I'll get to you in a sec. Super hot topic, actually, this idea of idiocracy. I think we're there, and I think we got there a while ago, to be honest. And I don't think it's all the fault of AI or Gen AI specifically. The challenge is there's a ton of people that have made their way through the workforce with a lack of mentorship, a lack of training, a lack of real skills. And what Gen AI is actually doing is creating a ton of market opportunity for really smart people to make a lot of money, is really what's happening. The general masses, I think, are getting sucked into a hype cycle. They're confusing what we have today with AI with this idea of like general intelligence AI, magic AI, that you can ask any question and it'll give you a solution. The reality is I talk to businesses every day and they can't tell me what their MRR is reliably. You know what I mean? There's basic, simple problems that aren't being addressed, and it's a skill set gap, in my opinion. I use a phrase often that we're overly concerned with artificial intelligence and not concerned enough with real intelligence. So anyways, just some thoughts there. Sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, we don't thoroughly believe that entry-level jobs train good executives, right? I think this is a fallacy we operate under, that you progress up and then you become a good manager. In fact, an entry-level worker right now who is top properly demanded in AI will be a better manager of entry-level labor 10 years from now than more of that's being done by AI.
I think we have a ton of redefining to do about a bunch of stuff, right? What is value? What is work? What are we willing to pay for? That's what this transformation is going to lead to. Our economy's gone through massive transformation over and over and over again. This idea that this is going to be destructive to the economy, I think it's going to lead to a redefinition of the economy. Entry-level jobs never led to good managers. In fact, you get promoted for being good at your job, doesn't mean you're actually good at managing. That's been a paradigm problem forever, right? So
I think you just brought up I think you just brought up an excellent point. Like, you know, they say a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? And the one thing I use generative AI on a daily basis. I use prompting. I've incorporated into my applications. I've fine-tuned models. I've done all these things. And the one thing that I clued into what you said there, when I'm prompting, I still need that institutional knowledge in myself to create great stuff. And I think a lot of people forget that. That said, I do believe that generative AI, yes, it's going to be, it's definitely disruptive. Like, we're at an inflection point right now. It's not, yes, there's a lot of hype out there, but what's going on is not hype. And some of the projects that I'm working on, we're streamlining processes to take the suck out of people's jobs. That's the way I look at it. We have a very human-centric approach. When I deploy things, I have to go through lawyers for one use case. There's all these things, and even when you look at AWS and all these other solution providers, like, they are putting guardrails, like they are baking in guardrails into the solution. So I really think, yes, there's a lot of people that are very concerned about what's going on. There's that new book, Nexus, that just came out. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but like, I tend to be more hopeful based on my experience. But then again, you know, it's cautious optimism. So, but I really believe that you still have to have that institutional knowledge, and companies there are many companies that aren't acting responsible, but right now I'm working with ones that are, so.
All right, so let's zero in a little bit more on marketing itself, and then we'll take on sales. And I think it's been great that we've been mentioning some of those things that perhaps we thought of as being only things that were thought of in the C-suite, like how do you craft a communication strategy, or how do you identify your ideal client profile. These are now things that if you are walking by a millennial or even a Gen Z who is using a chat tool, they're being asked for these things. It's a conversation happening, and they're as much involved in providing that information to the tool as anyone, and then getting good content out of it that you see on your websites or your social feeds and elsewhere. My question to the group is, do we want to keep democratizing that type of thing? Are we absolutely fine with using AI to put out our marketing materials, run it through our ads? Is this something that we want to see more of, or are there any on the panel who would take the side that say it should be something that stays at least finalized by a human being before it goes out?
So do you mean do the work or review and approve?
That is the issue.
Okay. I don't think it matters. The cat's out of the bag, right? So, if your boss says you can't use ChatGPT, then you'll go into the men's room and get your phone out, and you know what I mean? Like it's out of the bag. Like when we were becoming one of the largest Google Analytics providers in the Americas, most of our clients were very big companies that had someone sneak Google Analytics onto the website. And it was not garbage, and Adobe and IBM were, and enlightened laziness is extremely powerful, right?
So I guess my main question is, though, is it out of laziness, or are we actually witnessing more performance?
Enlightened laziness is a huge compliment. It's what
True.
every good engineer does, right? Why on earth would I dig a ditch with a spoon when I could invent a machine that could... It's not an insult.
No.
Well, that's like why I brought up the whole point where I see that even the way we do things, like right now we have all these dashboards, right? Why the hell do I want to log into another website? Does anybody want to log into another portal or website? No. You basically want to get to the solution. Why? So I can make strategic decisions quicker. Like, to me, that's not being lazy. That's just being smart to that point. And so I think we have to, even when we design tools or even look at our workflows, we have to think differently if we want to be successful in this new society. Well, not really new society, but...
There is definitely a bit of dashboard theater that sometimes the comfort that an executive feels by feeling that they have a dashboard is that they feel like they're driving the car, where they may be actually the little child that's sitting in that back seat that has that accessory with a little steering wheel on it, and it's not really driving the car, but they feel like they are. So Brett has challenged us with a way of looking at this, saying, well, the AI is smart enough to actually feed that right back into the campaigns. And actually, this is a question I wanted to ask Lubabah, which is, you are seeing some of the media campaigns that large consumer brands are doing,
Yeah.
and those ad platforms are now sometimes without our permission, or not giving us the option. They are disintegrating all of the creative. They're taking the video assets, the image assets, the text, and they are reformulating it into the ad units that they want to serve. Talking about the cat out of the bag, do you think we have any control over how they are doing this, if they are showing us that at the end of the day they're getting higher performance, lower cost conversions, results that we said we want to do, but they're doing it without us?
So for some campaigns, yes. So I just want to be clear. So you're asking in regards to marketing content, not analysis, right?
On the content
applications
side,
of the content.
and that they're using the analysis and closing the loop themselves, saying, well, you told me what objective to drive towards, I can do that all.
Right. So on the content purpose, we would not give it to AI right away, because we are, like Reckitt itself is held by many different laws and regulations. And if the wrong thing goes out and it's not, it doesn't adhere to our brand safety, we can get sued hardcore, right? Regardless of how it performs. So in that aspect, no, we would not give it over to AI unless we are very, very comfortable and trust the guardrails that are there. But if something performs well and we don't really know why, we still would not give it over to AI in terms of brand content. But in some portions, perhaps, like performance campaigns on the e-com level, right, that are more conversion-based, then yes, that makes sense. But a lot of our, nobody is going on our website to buy Lysol, right? These are like brand equity campaigns. But let's say, as I said, on the e-com side that are conversion-based, yes, there can be an application. But on content, not yet. We still need to go through all our checks and balances, get legal review, the whole stamp of approval from across the whole assembly line, that this content adheres to all brand guidelines and safety and rules and regulations.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing is it's about the definition again, right? Like while we live in this world of narrow AI or weak AI or whatever we want to call it, it's about putting all of those different things together. Like at some point, you're going to have an AI that's going to assess legal risk on these automated, optimized ads. That's what's going to happen, and the person making the money is the one figuring that out and making it a reality, right? So it's redefining where the work is and where the human intervention is. I think is the secret there.
I've written contracts using AI, and they've been more effective, I'll be honest, than my lawyer. So and the beautiful thing about that too, if you're using the AI properly, like at least the prompting, you can use it like as a consultative partner, right? And I think that that's the beauty of it. Like I think actually in some ways, we look at all these administrative jobs, and I was actually talking to another AI developer, and one of the things, and he was working for a construction company, I'm not going to say which one, but their whole goal is to remove all the bureaucracy that humans have created that prevent us from getting what we need done at a cost-effective, cost effectively. Like for example, I don't know if anybody's had home renovations. If you could remove like all the bureaucracy, all the paperwork, all those things, and all that money was spent on the individuals actually doing the work, I'm not going to shed a tear, really. Like I'm actually going to think I'm doing a good thing. So I think that that's where AI can help. Like, everybody's talked about taxes. Somebody brought up the other day to me, we all have to do our taxes. Are you going to be upset if AI does your taxes for you? Of course not, right? As long as it does a good job, nobody's going to care, right? And that's what we want. We want results generally. And those kind of results are positive results. And I don't want AI to like be replacing everything. So I think ultimately it comes down to the use case. But when it comes to bureaucracy, when it comes to paperwork, yeah, giddy up,
Yeah, and legal's a perfect example, right? Like when I was working at Canadian Tire, every time we put out a promotion out there, there'd be 20 lawyers crawling up our, whatever, telling us what we can and can't say. And some of it was completely subjective nonsense.
100%.
Right? So if you have an AI that can, tell you your risks objectively based on looking at recent case law and who's won and who's lost and who's been sued, that's way better than some random lawyer who like crawled out of bed and doesn't know any of that, right? The question is how informed you as a human need to be in terms of making some of these decisions. Like the taxes are a perfect example. Our tax code is open to all kinds of like fuzzy gray areas, right? So the AI, depending on how it's trained, could lean one way or the other in terms of risk tolerance, right?
And you can have multiple, and I don't know if anybody's heard of LangChain, but you can have like multiple AI engines. They can be fine-tuned, they can be not fine-tuned. Some of them are getting really good, in specific areas. You could have different AIs kind of have that conversation with each other using tools like LangChain. So, there's ways of doing this to mitigate those risks. And again, I don't think it's horrible that we're removing everything from bureaucracy to paperwork. I don't like doing paperwork. Again, AI, please help me.
Yeah, I think still the question though is how informed is the human, right? Like we've been talking about BI,
100%.
and there's dashboards that talk where you can do analysis on the profitability of a customer. There's a ton of ways to figure out how profitable a customer is, depending on what variables you want to include in that calculation, right? So if someone who's running a business is strictly asking an AI, hey, tell me what customer cohort is most profitable, but they don't understand all of the potential nuance that can go into that decision, they could be making horrible overall business decisions, right? So it's at what level does the human need to be involved or should be involved? And this is where that real intelligence question comes in, right? Like if we just defer to AI, we're just gonna keep getting dumber and dumber.
Oh, I agree, and I really believe in hybrid approaches, and I think that's what I think that's a common ground for all of us here, is probably a hybrid approach where you still need that institutional knowledge. You still need to be maybe somewhat of a guardrail, but like AI, it's getting better and better. And again, especially if you're fine tuning certain solutions, I saw somebody talk about like fine tuning and how you can leverage like smaller models. And yeah, and we've been finding the same thing. Smaller models, when it comes to categorization, when it comes to sentiment analysis and stuff like that, can outperform the bigger ones. So it depends on the use case, and it depends on what you're, again, trying to achieve. But when it comes to analytics, here's one thing. Like, I think that one of the strengths of AI is being able to connect the dots better than we can. And I think that we'd be foolish not to leverage that. And let me tell you about one little feature that they have in, like I use different models, but one of the things I stumbled across in OpenAI, which is in beta mode, they can actually, using an API, it can actually retain knowledge. So you can destroy, like it's called threads. You can basically create sessions where it will remember information from months ago or years ago, and then, like, as a human being, it's hard for us to correlate that information in different ways. Now, putting in that date factor, that's pretty powerful. That's a pretty powerful tool. And this is where, like, when we talk about RAG, this is, to me, even better than RAG when you're able to do something like this.
Peter?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I was going to add to the conversation here. I think that both in terms of jobs and the elements of the latest conversation, that programmers, in some respects, are under threat. Computer-aided software engineering, CASE, was a big thing in the 90s. It never was successful in ever getting beyond about 80%, 90% coding. But today, large language models with the right kind of prompting are able to code at a level of at least a PhD, who has a PhD in AI. And I know that for a fact because one of my colleagues is a graduate of John McCarthy's. John McCarthy's the guy who coined the term artificial intelligence. And my friend is a mathematician and a high-end programmer, and he says ChatGPT is outperforming him. So that's a pretty interesting observation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Turning to sales for a moment. For those of you who were here this morning, you witnessed a demo that Fuad and Justin gave where they were instructing a bot to craft an email or a phone call. And it raised the question, we're all fine with augmenting what we have, but when it comes to sales, I suppose we have to ask ourselves, in our organizations, it's not really just us that we have to consider if we were to go beyond augmenting salespeople with things like we saw in the demo this morning. It's actually, the verdict sits with our customers. So I just wanted to open to the panel here how they feel with real money, your job, of saying that you think we are close to or at the point where we think a sales job means an AI job. Because even this morning, we were seeing that the AI was writing an email as if it came from a human being. And at that point, we're into, okay, so the customer's reading it, they're using, biology that we've had forever to say, okay, that sounds like Glenn talking, or no, that doesn't quite sound like Glenn talking, or if it's got a different name, well, I'm going to ignore that, as Fuad said. I'm conditioned to treating it like I treat my smart speaker. I could just tell it to shut up. So is this what we really want to see in the future of a sales force, or are we going to use it in a smarter way or in a different way that we're only augmenting the existing people that we have that do sales jobs?
I think it's the same. There's different inflection points for every type of work, but you were talking about legal before. 95% of legal, let the machine do it. Like, I own a small business in Quebec. Hey, machine, do this in French. Like, it saved me thousands of dollars, right? But the inflection point where it's, but what do I do with this? I'd like to make that decision, right? And enterprise selling, like where it's like this is a $250,000 engagement, 90% of the work, cold calling's dead, right? 25 years ago, it was $80. I used to rent a cube from you back in the day, remember? Yeah. 16 years ago. Yeah. We were grinding 90 calls a day just to get someone to pick up the phone. You can't do that anymore. Machines do that. And I like that machines do that because cold calling sucks. Intro emails, LinkedIn, but there becomes a point where the science of selling becomes the art of selling, and machines can't do that. But there's a particular inflection point in sales, as there is in marketing, as there is in legal, where you need decision support, not decision execution by the machine, you know?
Anyone else?
I agree entirely. I think it's varies by segment for sure. Like if you're doing a transactional sale, AI can probably take a lot of that over. If it's a complex relationship sale, AI is not there. Maybe we'll get there someday. I think the interesting thing is actually sales is going to become more important, I think, in this era of AI. I think people are going to want to have some level of interaction, some level of assurance that isn't a machine, especially at those higher end ticket prices.
Okay, well put. And yes, that's kind of what I would expect people to say, because we have as much to risk as the person who is entrusting us with their money. So that's probably you've given some good guidelines for how to handle this. Gary, while you got the mic, I'm going to keep the spotlight on you. You have founded several startup firms that look for data in what I would call out of the ordinary places. So for those of you who want to check out either Breadcrumbs or Uncover, I'll just leave it to say that in the case of Breadcrumbs, you are plowing into a marketing automation system to score leads. In the case of Uncover, you are going into all sorts of funky places, even a company's marketing emails, to show me what their, how we would basically be reverse engineering their marketing plan from their marketing emails. These are some definite ones that are off the beaten path. And I guess my question for you is, what else is fair game? And where do you think the underserved data sources that are inside of our company walls could bring the next killer app?
That's a big question. Well, first an announcement, Breadcrumbs is now Mad Kudu, by the way. It was recently acquired, so no longer my company. Thank you very much. I think it's about thinking about data differently, right? So Breadcrumbs, for those who didn't know, was a lead scoring management platform. Allowed you to build multiple scoring models for different use cases, acquisition, retention, expansion, whatever it might be. I think often people don't think about the deeper meaning of data or digging down beyond the surface, right? So for example, most basic scoring models have some variables around website visits and page visits, and people define certain pages as having higher value than others. We actually have way more data than that around web traffic, right? We have dwell time, we have the whole user journey. We can use tools like Hotjar to see like intensity of content engagement across different parts of the site. All of those things make for a better model. So it's really about thinking about the richness of the data and how deep you can go into it and what it actually means for what you're trying to achieve, I think is how I think about it.
Do you think that those different data sources get more powerful when we combine them with existing sources that were purpose-built for feeding AI?
Yeah, listen, I think when it comes to leveraging AI or ML, for the most part, I think more data is better, right? Like about these connections that these algos can make that we can't, right? That we just don't understand why this combination of activity is actually a super high predictor of this behavior. So yeah, I guess is the short answer.
That's a good point. point, you just brought up ML. Like everybody thinks that you need to solve everything through AI. ML is quicker, uses less resources, and especially if you're doing basic things like binary things, like training
Like a lead scoring model.
a lead scoring model.
Yeah.
If it's just one of the use cases I had was I was looking for terminology that could be considered racist or inappropriate. They put guardrails on these generative AI solutions, and therefore, in my mind, the only way to really solve it effectively is to use machine learning. So.
Do we all know the twink example for this? So, MLLs train on Wikipedia. They write all of these terminologies for communities, for community identifications. In this case, twink is an identity for a gay man type. Because that is highly indexable on pornography sites, it's also a pornographic terminology. So what happens is websites that advocate for gay rights, for a visibility in the community, and who name men by self-selected behaviors and self-selected terminologies are erased by models trained to use those guardrails in ways that we actually want them to use. Right? So I don't know, apropos of nothing at all, but I think it's the other side of that argument that like we can use those controls, but we are absolutely unsure of the outcome or the feasibility of the data set after we use those controls, or if we still want to extract any analysis from that data set, which may now be clean but incomplete to the point of uselessness.
No problem. I'll rehash what was being said, Burkett. Thank you. So, in a nutshell, the models are only as good as the data that they're provided, and if that data does not factor in the fact that there are contextually okay uses of certain terms, or and also contextually inappropriate, that it won't be able to make that distinction. This is kind of a rehash of the, we've heard stories of things like facial recognition, where facial recognition engines work with, Northern European light-skinned pigment people, and they work horribly for people who don't have that complexion because of the body of data that was used to train them. So it's a very real thing to flag, and within ML, if any of the panelists want to mention or share what things they would be guarding on for sales and marketing so that we don't simply kick this can down the road farther.
Well, just one quick touch point on that. So that demo we saw about the cold email or the hyper-personalized email, there's tons of examples of that going wrong with AI right now. There was one recently in the news about how someone was cold prospected and the opening line was something around the death of their mother, and then shifted straight into a hard pitch, right? Bad news. Just bad news. So there are real risks, but we tend to focus on the things that we've been trying to do for a while, right? Personalization, hyper-contextual. Really, we need to be solving for like the things that even with good personalization hold us back, right? So like, what is a good trigger for sending a hyper-personalized email? We've been talking about, right time, right place, right message in marketing forever. I don't know anybody in the market that's trying to offer a solution that actually helps you identify that time based on real-time signals in the marketplace. So if I was going to hypothesize an area where there's opportunity for a product, it's that, right? How do you consume real-time behavioral data to trigger relevant marketing activity?
Yeah, there's a standard old way that we've done this in business, and it's called a risk-reward ratio. So if hyper-personalization doesn't seem to, like there's no more, it's not, the juice is not worth the squeeze, then just go with a plain old boilerplate email because that's always worked. So use the right tool for the right job.
Personalization too, that's mostly machine learning from what I understand. When you look at stuff like YouTube, the personalization in there happens through machine learning because, quite frankly, you couldn't put it into AI because it just wouldn't be fast enough.
The example's neat because it touched on, there's lots of things that go right with AI, lots of things that go bang. Your example, sir, was the data's clean, the model works, everything's fine, people are complicated, language is fluid, right? So a big example with like brand equity, your product is the shit. Your product is shit. A machine goes barf, right? But the data's fine, everything's fine. They're machines, right? Right? And they need, that's why they call it training and not nailing it every time. The machines need to be trained, and if there wasn't a proper review and approve, if there wasn't a grown-up in the room who's a real person that goes, no, shit and the shit are different, things go bang. The other side of it is if you feed garbage to a machine, it will do garbage work. I really like the word hallucinating in AI. It brings me joy because it's so true. 1 + 1 = New Brunswick is not helpful machine, But that's the other side because you will definitely get it wrong if the ingredients are garbage. But also you can get everything right and it's a machine. So where's that review and approve?
And Jim, would your answer in short be make sure that you allocate resources onto both? Don't try to index only for people who are dishing in the machine, dishing in data into the machine and getting results, or people who are taking the results and getting insights. It's, or executing. It's got to be both.
Yeah, watching the machine is methodology. It's practice and teamwork and iteration. And the other side is just good engineering. Is it clean? Is it ethical? Which is a word I haven't heard a whole lot today. But is it clean? Is it ethical? Is it available? Is it consistent? Huge part of winning, not something that's given enough time or funding. And then as a team, are we taking this in? Are we using it? Are we setting up the next CMO? Are we turning into the idiocracy? I don't know, right? But there's a line in the middle about creating something that can be used and then how is it being used? And I just like that example wasn't about data. It was about letting machines run amok,
And I think we're sliding into governance here. With sales and marketing, everyone here has either been in the position where they have pitched getting technology to be purchased so that we can advance how we're doing in sales and marketing, or they have been on the receiving end where they have heard those and had to make money decisions on doing them. We went through about a decade of this with the explosion in marketing technology tools on a SaaS platform. And many here, I guess, we engorged ourselves on buying so many point solutions, it's not even funny. Now, we are going back to the same people that gave us the money to do that, and we are asking for AI. I'm interested you can pick which side of the table you want to be on, but I'm interested in hearing what you are thinking from a governance standpoint on how do we prevent some of the worst excesses that we had in the last wave from coming in and clobbering us in this wave.
So when the early days of selling digital analytics and reporting and quality data, large companies, senior executives would go, what's the ROI on good analysis? And my response would be, I can't fix stupid. So if I give you good insights and you don't know how to execute on them, on your head be it. There's a little bit of that in AI, but AI can fix stupid a little bit, So the ability to actually tie an ROI use case to machine dug the ditch and assisted with the architecture and your team is leaner and the work is good, I think it's a little bit different than 15 years ago is my point. Because it's not just getting smarter, it's actually outsourcing some of the smarts.
My perspective, again, is more like the startup SMB into the mid-market. We're going to do the exact same thing. There's going to be all kinds of random AI tools on random credit cards, and at some point, somebody's going to try and create an Excel spreadsheet and figure out why there's 300 tools that we're paying for.
Are you kind of saying that revenue will mask a lot of sins.
For sure, and just the novelty of it. We're in another typical tech hype cycle, right? It's all anybody can talk about is the AI magic pill that's going to solve everybody's problems, right? And I think AI will solve a lot of problems, but it's not the off-the-shelf solution that you plug in a horrible prompt into. That's not the real solution. And what we're going to see is, I'm also an angel investor. I get pitched on AI products all the time. There's going to be a massive graveyard of AI solutions. So one of the governance solutions will be just wait till they go out of business, because there will be a ton of them.
Right, wait for the reckoning.
Yeah.
I'm going to push on this, and I'm inviting those who haven't spoken yet on it to weigh in, because we can zoom out a little bit from even the organization, because I do think this time is different. Most of these in the past, we've done incremental productivity gains as our business case, right? It will save this many person hours. We're now dealing with something that can scale for any way that I can do the numbers. It might as well be infinite. Okay, it can scale infinitely. So now what is our calculus for how we decide on a technology that's ever getting smarter? It's not going to be a step change. It's more like a tidal change. And we don't know how big that tidal event's going to be. So how do we speak in standard old biz terms with people to try and get this adopted when we're up against that kind of unknown?
I would argue that you need to focus on risk, measuring some aspect of risk, assessing, in terms of, and reputation. If it's external facing, certainly reputation. If it's internal, that's a little different, but it still has to have some kind of rules. I might also point out that guardrails are voluntary. Governments have published them. They're voluntary. Governments have asked corporations to accept these guardrails, and they're doing so, but it's voluntary. So what we've seen so far in the improvement of these language models, and therefore using machine learning type technologies, is a gradual improvement by volunteering. That little light pressure, if you like, from governments. But what we really need is, I think, certification and regulation and enforcement and penalties. Those have not been defined. And the closest we come to any regulation is the European AI Act, which was just passed a few months ago, but it doesn't come into effect for 2 years.
Lubabah?
So from like a corporate enterprise perspective, in the past you could buy a tool and the tool doesn't work and everybody knows the tool doesn't work and it's still there and you're still paying for it. It's just legacy, it's there. Now it's about the impact of the tool. If the impact of the tool has not proven itself, then that's it. Like, you're not just going to go on and say, oh, this is one of our legacy tools and we're just going to continue, because the labor force is also a lot smarter. They can, point out if the impact is not quite there, or flag those where the tool promised to do certain things, but it's been a year or more and it hasn't. Whereas in the past, something didn't work, it's still there. Too bad. There's no other solutions. You have to stick with it. It's there. You just got to swallow the problems, whatever, keep going forward. So I think that's a shift that's happening, and it's from here, it's an impact. And I just want to touch on the guardrails perspective. So maybe, Google, Amazon, they might, the guardrails might be voluntary or whatnot. But when they're being sold to the clients, some of those clients, they are held by regulations, right? So for us, we are held by really high regulations. Yes.
But not regulation.
Well, we are, right? Like what kind of, we are, yes, as a company. So the service provider, they may be voluntary for them, but if they're selling it to a body that's using it and they're held to a higher standard, well, automatically you need to sell something that has those guardrails, because I'm going to be accountable for it. You might not be accountable, but I will be accountable. So I will not really do business with you unless I have that trust that those guardrails are. So it might just water down or filter down in that aspect as to who they are serving, right? If they're serving entities that don't have those kind of regulations, then yeah, they're probably going to get away with it.
Well, one step is sort of in between having regulations or just the guardrails is actually going to third parties. So you develop something, you take it to a third party and get them to certify your algorithms. So they do a testing, and they have developed some reputation to be that. And that way you're at least gaining a step up on a competition. You may be a little bit of a leader in terms of the government looking at how the industry is self-regulating. So, I mean, I think that's one of the very positive ways to move on that.
Thank you. And we didn't get time for that, but explainability is another piece that can be inserted into these tools. Why did you do what you did? So I do not envy people in the audience today for the tough decisions that you have lying ahead for how you're going to be using AI in sales and marketing. But I think you should count yourselves lucky in that you got the clear, unvarnished view from an incredible panel here today. So can I ask you to please put your hands together and thank them?